Hey guys, my name is Eric Vento. This is yet another podcast of Government to Private where we talk about people's successful transitions from the government, whether it's law enforcement, the military, the intelligence community, or any other aspect in between. The purpose of these podcasts is really to give you a comprehensive look at different people's journeys into the corporate world and really bring it home for you that there's a lot of different ways that the transition can actually occur. And it's not just limited to one person's advice or one person's experience. And so I really appreciate our current guest being on the show with us today. His name is Chris Almonrode, and he was a mentor that I reached out to on my own transition out of law enforcement. Chris and I have known each other for a number of years. We've met in person at ACES GSX, and he is just a man of integrity. He is a good friend, and he has a very, very good reputation within the security world. So I'm really, really happy that Chris is on the show with us today to share with us his transition journey and his wisdom. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Hi, the great intro. I kind of wish we had like the radio program where you hit the button and there's like a fake applause, and all that kind of good stuff, kind of get my blood pumping. But it's great to see you. I'm so proud of where you have come from and the transition that you've made. And we've had this discussion for years about this process of transitioning out of law enforcement and making it on the private side, right? Because in the beginning, it's such a mystery. And then you get on the other side and you go, that's not so bad. And so prior to getting on here, I listened to a couple of your other podcasts and was listening to a couple of folks. I haven't had a chance to listen to all of them, but there's some similarities and there's different journeys that people took. And I'm just excited to be here. I hope that people will listen, maybe pull some nuggets out of this, and I'm happy to have a great conversation.
Absolutely, brother. I'm happy to have you, and this kind of feels like we've come full circle a little bit, So again, really happy to have you here. So, Chris, why don't we start with your background?
Oh my gosh, it's long, and in the modern day working world, as I get into my background, someone staying at the same company for 25 years and retiring is an anomaly. And I learned that early on, and it kind of fits my personality. I was willing to try different things, and my law enforcement career was like that. So I started off early in life at age 18, working retail loss prevention. I knew I wanted to go in law enforcement or protect people or be involved in that sort of industry early on. So I started off in retail, working for companies like JCPenney. I'm going to age myself, Montgomery Wards, and was part of loss prevention and safety programs, but I was using that as a bridge just to get into law enforcement, and went into law enforcement at 21, worked for a handful of small agencies in the North Texas area, eventually retiring out as a sergeant in 2009. And I always in my journey, which is good to talk about because you have people right now that are in their law enforcement role and they may be thinking about transitioning and they're kind of like, I don't know if I should, or what can I do before I transition? And I always tried to capitalize on what was before me, right? So I said, when I got into crime prevention, I wanted to be the best crime prevention person that I could. And I won like Texas Crime Prevention Officer of the Year from the Texas Crime Prevention Association. And it's not to be braggadocious, but what I always said was, if you're going to do something, do it to the best that you can. And if there's a award to be given, why not? Let's go for it. If you're already building a program, like for National Night Out, if you're already building a local National Night Out like program for your crime prevention program, why not go ahead and submit that program to the National Night Out Committee and see if you can get an award? And so I did that in my career, but I did that not only with that, but when I got into professional standards as a professional standards sergeant, I said, well, why don't we do the Texas Best Practices program, that professionalized program? Because if you're already writing policy and procedure, you might as well go to the next level and just do the next thing. It just makes sense. So as I've gone through this journey, I've always tried to just be the very best, right? Just kind of get to that point. And in 2006, my wife encouraged me to go back to school. And we had talked on another conversation about how if you want to get somewhere, find you a good lady, find you a good woman that'll elevate you to the next level. And my bride does that for me. And she challenged me to go back to school because the city would pay for it. I finished my undergrad work, went to graduate school, which I never would have thought I would have made it to graduate school, but I studied public administration, the same trajectory that, I'm going to go up in the industry. I'm going to be a sergeant. I'm going to be a lieutenant. Then I'm going to, hopefully be a deputy chief, then a chief, then maybe go over to city management. And it was about this time in 2008, 2009, I went to the Institute for Law Enforcement Administration in Plano, which was like a command college. And that's where I really learned a lot about leadership and management and started reading a lot more than I'd ever had in the past. And I realized I've got some real good skills here. And I also began to self-reflect, and I was like, man, am I really enjoying this as much as I used to? I think that if I would have stayed just a beat cop, I probably would have been much more happier just working midnights chasing bad guys. But I kind of started becoming a malcontent. And so I'm having this malcontent being the word for anybody listening, is just somebody who's just kind of fed up where they're at, and they're not giving their citizens their all because their mind is really elsewhere, which when you really think about it, now that I'm a citizen with a family, I want all my cops to be happy and ready to go chase bad guys and not be a malcontent. And I think I was becoming a malcontent. And I started noticing there is ugliness within law enforcement that a lot of us don't want to admit. There's a lot of infighting, there's backfighting, there's all things going on, which managers in that space need to recognize. But it's because you work in an industry full of egos, and you want your cops to have a big ego. Like, you need a guy to have a big ego to be able to go after a bigger guy and take him down. You've got to be a little bit, out there to do that. And I had a big ego, and I'm in an industry full of big egos. And I'm just doing a lot of self-reflection and through a series of events where heads were clashing and just weren't getting along. And I had enough education where I just said, well, it's time to go. And I left law enforcement in the worst time you can, which was in 2009, where the economy was tanking. And there was not a whole lot in old Chris's retirement at all. But I had an opportunity to work with a human trafficking advocacy nonprofit that would rescue people around the world and provide them medical and this, that, and the other. And I thought that this was going to be my way out, and all the funding got stripped away. And so now I found myself 9 months being so-called retired out of law enforcement without a job. And I was like, well, I'm a cop, right? I mean, I can get a job anywhere, right? We've always heard this, right? Well, I'm just going to be a cop. I'm going to retire. I'm going to be a security director, and you're just going to walk in the door, and it's all going to be hunky dory, right? Just because of you wore the badge.
Right.
And we're laughing because that's what still people think that's what will happen. And ironically, it happens for a few, but not a lot of people. And that arrogance led me down this path of thinking I was going to land something. And I'll share this with your viewership that I found myself unemployed, no money, going to a food pantry, didn't know where the next paycheck was going to come from. And I was humbled, right? We, as a cops, we wear our identity as Chris the cop, right? My name is Chris. I'm a cop, but it's a part of who you are, right? You say it all the time. And so I was really humbled, and I was applying for every job under the sun, the shotgun blast approach, right? You flood the market with your resume. And I landed a job at one of the largest man guarding companies in the world at the time was G4S. And I worked for a wonderful mentor that I still speak to from time to time today, named David. And David was the general manager of this particular location in Dallas, and he brought me in as a senior account executive to manage all underperforming accounts. And he basically said, here's the deal. You're going to come in and you're going to clean house and you're going to clean up all this underperforming stuff because this is the worst branch in the entire company. And through that, Eric, I put into place all the leadership and management things that I learned at Aliyah and began to start my journey in security. And this was my Rocky moment, right? I started turning around all these underperforming accounts. Then I was asked to teach how I did that to the rest of the branch. We got the rest of the branch performing much better. We then took that branch to Gold Club status, which is the best that you can be within the company. And I was finally back. I wasn't making near as much money as I needed to be making, but I was working. And I call that, and we call it in the business, a bridge job. I knew that I wasn't going to be there forever, but I used that job for those 3 years to get a reputation in the industry, to get connected with people through As Is International, to make connections with global leaders and people we were doing business with, in hopes of then taking that skill set and moving it on, where now I have my degree, I have my law enforcement background, and I have some industry experience. And that's what led me to Heritage Auctions, where I built up their global security program, focusing in on using what I learned by getting involved in the CPP program, building up a security operations center, travel safety security program, refine the physical security programs, set standards for executive protection. Like, I got to build a whole program, and that kind of solidified me as now I'm a global security practitioner. That led to being a global leader at CBRE, where now I get to consult with some of the most major Fortune 50 companies around the world on their man guarding and physical security programs. And I kept grinding through that. Now, along this pathway, I ran across a startup company that I'm just going to leave them unnamed, but it was the worst decision I ever made. And I made it through that. And the biggest lesson for the viewership is that you'll make a mistake. And the great speaker, a phenomenal pastor I listen to named Greg Groeschel, has a whole sermon about, it's not when you make a misstep, it's the next step that makes that counts. And so I made a huge mistake by taking that opportunity, looking at certain dollar figures and not looking at what I really needed to be looked at. And then I rebounded and recovered. But through these relationships that me and you've developed over the years with great leaders and making ourselves available, I haven't had to apply for a job. And I had people reach out to me, says, we want you to be a part of our team. We want you over here. And I landed where I'm at today with a global powerhouse physical security integration company who just truly blesses me daily. And but it's been a culmination of all my experience and relationships along the way. So any comments on that? I mean, Eric, I like when you give me a little feedback, but it's the summary has been like a potpourri, like it's been just a potpourri of any and all things security, you know?
Honestly, like the thing that comes to mind when I listen to your story is that, we all have this idea in our heads of where we think our life is going to go, and, when I started in law enforcement, I was for sure that I would be one of those 30, 40-year guys. It was my dream. It was my passion.
Wow.
It was borderline obsession. And, I left law enforcement after 10 years involuntarily, as you know, and, went into the private sector. And, my career since 2017 has been nothing short of a miracle. and yes, there's been hard times, there's been layoffs, there's been a lot of turmoil and stuff like that. But there's also been mountains. There's also been some really high points. And I think what's really important to remember is that no matter where you think your career trajectory is going to go, if you do end up having to transition to the private sector, either on time, whatever that means, or before time, or before you think you're going to, just remember that there's people out here who have been there before you, and there's a whole network and a whole army of people who have similar backgrounds who are here to support you. And so, like, when I hear about your story, even though I've heard it numerous times, I still think every single time, like, man, that's so cool.
Eric, there are so many cool things that happen. Let me tell you that let's hang with the Heritage Auctions deal, which I'm still great friends with everybody over there. Matter of fact, my kids work there as interns because of my relationships. But because of my relationships, reoccurring theme for the viewership, right? Relationships. And when the reason why I got that job is there was a gentleman by the name of Tom Krenzik, who's a lifetime as is guy, phenomenal security practitioner. I think he's retired now. Tom called me one day knowing that I was kind of looking around for something next after G4S. And he was like, "Hey, Chris, you got a minute?" And I said, "Yeah, Tom, what is?" He goes, "Hey, man, I just interviewed for this job over at this place called Heritage Auctions. And the whole time that they're interviewing me, I'm going, this job isn't for me. This job is for Chris." And listen, I didn't even know about Heritage. I never applied for the job. I didn't know anything. Tom is interviewing with them and says, "You know what, guys? You know the guy that you need Chris Almonrode." And so they called me and they said, "Well, this sounds kind of odd, but we were interviewing this guy and he says that you were the guy that we need to talk to." And I said, "Well, tell me about the job." And it was a beautiful journey. And I'm still great friends with the leadership over there, and I could get a chance to consult with them from time to time. I adore them people. They're just great. It just wasn't, I had outgrown the position. I could do it in my sleep. And if you know my personality, I mean, if I get bored, hey, it's time to go because this guy needs to be challenged. But it was because of relationships. I mean, could you imagine networking to the point where someone just calls you and says, "Hey, man, these people are looking for somebody and your name's on my heart, that this would be a great fit for you." And Tom was right. I don't know what kind of angelic moment we had there, but he was right. It was great. It was a great journey. I made great friends there. And like I said, now my kids work there. But it's always been that way. And I think the reason why is because, I do consult, but the only people I've ever charged money to is like this much. I barely charge money to anybody, because if a global leader reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I understand that you've done this before, and man, I just want to pick your brain. Are you open to that?" I'm like, yeah, because I still have this innate desire to protect people no matter what. And I think that people in their very nature have a tendency to want to help people no matter what, right? As long as you just need my thoughts and we can talk for 30 minutes and I can help you out with a problem, I can lead you to resources and help you out. And me and you do this all the time. You're building a resume for somebody and they want another idea about whatever. You'll say, "Hey, you might want to give Chris a call." And I'll do these Saturday morning coffee chats where I get them on the phone and we just have a chat, real transparent conversation. But I think that, whether you're a religious person or not a religious person, if you're putting good vibes out into the world and you're making yourself helpful to people, man, it always comes back. And I get people calling me all the time and say, "Hey, Chris, the business I'm in now, I'm in sales." And if the viewers may not know that, but could you imagine, I used to be a cop, a sergeant, a security director, and then now I'm leading a sales team in the integration industry. But at the core of that is trust. Our clients have to trust us. And if you come in with the right amount of integrity at the end of the day, they know you're going to do the right thing because your name is attached with integrity, and that's I still think I have my baseball card up here, and it has a quote from Abraham Lincoln talking about he'd rather be a man of integrity than anything else, or something to that effect. And my integrity is everything. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at this. If you want to work in the security industry in a certain capacity and you don't even know where to start, and you look on LinkedIn and you say, oh man, that guy's the director at, name some Fortune 50 company. And you're like, man, that job has always sounded interesting to me. Well, you know what? Call the guy, go through LinkedIn, send them a message and go, you know what? I had people reach out and says, you know what? Your background seems very interesting. I've always wanted to do that. Can you just share with me how you got there? And then you're like, man, I would love to, because we love to talk about ourselves, right? So like, yeah, I'll talk to you all day long and share what I can share with you and just encourage you and love you right where you're at. And I still do that every month. I still do that with somebody I've never met before. So,
I mean, it's the same concept when you're in law enforcement. Like if you're looking at going to a different agency, what do? You go out and do a ride along.
yeah,
You go out and reach out to a friend or a friend of a friend at the agency and say, hey, what's it like working over there? Like, what kind of equipment do you guys have? What kind of technology do you have? Like, how's the leadership there? Just because it may be easier to lateral into a different law enforcement agency doesn't mean the decision to do so is any less important. And you brought up a really good point from the corporate side as well, is, how do I make a good decision? And it's just like you said, it's like, figure out who's in a role at that company that is similar to what you're looking for and just reach out to them. When I'm coaching people through, on how to do that from a LinkedIn perspective, I always tell them that obviously you don't want to be sending out hundreds of messages. You want to be targeting people based upon their likelihood of responding to you. And so if you have a shared law enforcement background or a shared military background, usually, knock on wood, but usually they're more likely to respond to you because of that shared background. And so, I teach them how to, like, okay, here's how you find people with a law enforcement background. Here's how you find people with whatever background you're looking for. And then here's how you reach out to them cold, and just say, hey, you know what? We never met before, but your job looks fun. I'd love to spend 15, 20 minutes talking about what your day-to-day looks like.
right.
Do you like working there? What's the culture and the environment like? Because every single one of us, for the most part, we've had a toxic boss. We've had a bad working environment. And, at least for me, that's the number one thing that I look for in any job is, who am I going to report to? Like,
we could do a whole podcast on how to work for a narcissist. Like, it would be the funniest show ever.
Yeah.
I have so many great examples.
Oh my gosh, yes. But it's just like, we all want to transition into a relatively soft landing. It may be a really challenging job, but man, if you have a good boss, that just makes everything better. And so I really appreciate, what you said about that. And, you mentioned the integrity and the trust, behind it, relationships. I feel like I beat myself to death all the time talking about relationships, but it's really the core of everything that we do.
It's a force multiplier, right? Like, you can try to go out on your own and, you'll have your resume and you have your standard background, and you're going to make X, or you might be able to get this one company, or you can really network. And now not only are you targeting bigger companies with greater benefits with a higher salary, but when you land there, you have a greater network of people you can reach out to. I've never paid for a consultant. You know why? Because I know so many people. I can pick up the phone today and say, hey, I'm trying to price executive protection in Lima, Peru, and I'm just having some challenges on who do I need to go with, and I will get everything that I need. I don't need to outsource that to anybody. I can do that all myself. Whatever the problem is, I know enough people to get enough information and have enough resources, but it all came through the networking, right? I think that coming from the law enforcement side, you've got to shed you got to shed the ego and know what you know, and you know, but here's the other thing, you can't ask without giving back either. And
Yeah.
you know, I've had people reach back out. I have people that I've helped that never gave me the time of day when I needed help, and I still help them. But I'm just telling you, it's not the right thing to do. If you're reaching out and asking for people for help and they're guiding you along, you better be giving back, right? It's the right thing to do. It's great for the industry. I think that there's an awesome culture within the security industry that has been fostered by great people like Chuck Andrews, like you, our friend that works out of Atlanta. You got Francisco over at Facebook. You've got Brian. I mean, what's funny is we all, I don't know if you know, if I shared this with you, I think I did when we were in Atlanta at the first time we met in person, where I bought a website in 2010 called lifeafterthebeat.com. And I had this whole idea, and it was not only for, you know, optimally, you want somebody that, let's say they did 20 years, they're starting to become that malcontent, they're looking to retire. So we're like, well, what do you want to do? And all of a sudden they said, I want to be a fraud examiner for Discover. Okay. We're like, okay, well, let's get you hooked up with a certified fraud examiners group. You need to be a part of the Dallas chapter. You need to start going to the meetings. You're going to start networking. You're going to build your LinkedIn. You're going to get your resume. And those last 3 years, maybe your department will pay for you to do certain trainings, get certain certifications. Now you transition out with everything you need. That's the optimal scenario, right? You get your retirement. Now you're making money in a private sector. But then there's the others that they go through a divorce, they get a DWI, they're ousted, they can no longer be a cop, and they don't know what to do. And they think that the private sector is going to give 2 cents about their, or you know, they're going to care about this DWI. They're not going to care. And those people need help because they still have a family. They still need to be shown grace. They still need help. And they still have great skills that can transition into the private sector. And the private sector ain't going to care about the DWI. Now, hope to God they'll get that taken care of. But it's not that big of a deal. Your life isn't over. You have a whole life on the other side. And then, you know, you have others that go out for other disciplinary reasons, or maybe they got in a bad shooting and they need to transition. So LATB was going to be designed to take all of those people and to help them transition because there's value there. And I'm getting all passionate about it again, but I you know, I got to the point where I couldn't take it to the next level. So I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to love on people right where they're at. And if they need a transition, if they need advice, I'll guide them in what I'm doing. And I've had an opportunity to do that over and over again for free, but it comes back to me. And those are the greatest meetings I have. And I still do about 2 a month. I did 2 last month, but usually on a Saturday, I got somebody reaching out and we'll have a chat. And then some are special cases that, you know, I give them assignments and then follow up with them because they still got that ego, right? I need them to shed the badge and like, you got to get rid of that, you know?
I just think it's important that you never know the impact of your actions. You know, I regularly get messages from people who are like, man, I've been following you for like 4 years. I love your content. It's finally time for me to do something different. Are you open to having a conversation? You know, and, you know, it's like every single thing that you do, both on paper, but also the words that come out of your mouth have such a long lasting impact on people.
Yeah.
And I think it's just something to keep in mind as you go through life, because again, it comes down to relationships, but also comes down to reputation, you know, and it only takes one misstep to ruin a reputation, but it takes a lifetime to build it.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, that's so true.
And that's just something that I always want to keep in mind. But let's jump in a little bit into certifications. Like, you know, you've been a member of ACES for a long time. You've been an instructor for the Certified Protection Professional. You know, that's been something that's been near and dear to your heart. So a lot of times we get questions from people about, hey, should I get this certification? Like, what do you think about that? What do you think about this? Do I need one to be successful? Do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I listen. When I got into it, I learned right off the bat that you need to take up as much landscape on that resume as possible, right? And when I was a rookie, when I met, and you may remember this, when you're a rookie and you met somebody who was a Texas Master Peace Officer, you're like, man, when I get my Texas Master Peace Officer certification, I'm going to be the man. And I was so excited when I got that Master Peace Officer certification. And I think that it just brings more credibility no matter what you're doing, right? So I knew that when I wanted to transition, I needed to have that acronym behind my name. And so I went straight for the CPP. And for me, the CPP program just meant so much because it gave me a great pay increase. And when you're talking about a guy that when I transitioned in 10 months, I'm going to a food pantry. Like I'm going to, like I'm telling you, Eric, I had no money. I didn't know I was going to make the house payment. I didn't know what I was going to do, but there's a church that was giving me food so that I didn't have to pay for it. And I was like, so thankful. And so when you're now making well over six figures and life is good, it's only because that CPP came about. It was validation. And so it was hard to study for, but I made
Was
the
it?
CPP. Yes, for me it was. But see, I'm a late learner and I'm ADD to the max, but I didn't go back to school till I was 35. I didn't go to graduate school till I was 38. And it just takes Chris a little bit longer. So I'm a great speaker. I'm just terrible at studying and remembering things. So what I did is as I learned the CPP protocols and programs and all the things you have to study, I would apply them at Heritage Auctions. So that program was built upon all the ASIS standards. And so I intentionally, when HR was coming up with a new program, I would say, well, according to the standard, we need to make sure we're doing A, B, and C. And so all of it became alive to me. And so when I got the certification, I immediately got a pay increase and my resume began to get to the top of the heap. The first certification I got, though, was the CIPM through the International Association of Cultural Property Protection. I got that one really quick because I was looking for a certification that was designed around museum quality objects that would give me some recognition within my discipline at Heritage. And so I needed some quick wins. So, if I was to coach anybody up in today's market, I mean, if you're going to go the loss prevention route, you need to be in that loss prevention certification program. If you're going into fraud, you need to get the CFI. If you're going to be in physical security, get your PSP. If you're going to be in a global security position, CPP. The PCI certification, I'm on the fence about it, right? The investigators, yeah. I mean, I just it hasn't moved anything for me. I mean, but I'm on the ASIS Security Services Committee, and I believe in everything that to do. I just it's not, the PCI is not at the same level as a CFI.
Yeah,
just not. Yeah. And I don't know, I can't say anything.
I think
more
you need
about
a CFE.
CFE, yeah, CFE, Certified Product Examiner. Yeah. But I love certifications. Anything that can put an acronym behind your name, even like Six Sigma, program management. In today's world, in the business that I'm in, if you're Six Sigma certified, if you have the program management or PMP certifications, there's even a security project management certification course you can go through. At a minimum, oh my gosh, at a minimum, ESRM, right? Like even our salespeople, all of them are taking ESRM through ASIS. So if you are looking to transition out of law enforcement, start looking at the different certifications that you can go ahead and get today. You can work within your community. I mean, I'd be tickled pink if my local city had a couple of guys that knew, and we could, we can change the way things are going around the city just through basic taking crime prevention to a whole nother level. The crime prevention programs that they have today just don't meet the level of what you can get through ASIS. But it's a long road, but long story short, yes, get
Awesome.
a certification.
Yeah, I had that question come up pretty consistently, and what I tell them is, it always depends on what you want to pursue, because every certification costs money and it costs money to maintain. And so, you don't want to spread yourself too thin by going out and signing up for all these certifications, because you eventually have to pay to maintain those certifications.
Yeah.
But, just like you said, the certified fraud examiner for investigation, the CPP for security risk management. I know you mentioned the CFI, which is the certified forensic interviewer, which is, which is liked in multiple industries. The loss prevention, I forget what the C stands for, the LPC certification.
Yeah, LPQ is one of them.
Oh, okay.
Loss prevention
right.
qualified, and let's not forget the emerging one, which is certified threat manager through ATAP. Yeah,
that's an extremely hard certification to get.
Yes, if you're, I was mentoring a guy here a while back who teaches active shooter. He's the active shooter liaison for this federal agency, and he really enjoys that space. I said, you need to join up with ATAP. You need to get your threat management certification, and now you would bankroll all day long being able to set up programs for workplace violence, because it's a huge new role that works alongside of your business continuity folks as well. I got a handful of friends that do business continuity, and that's another certification that it's not hard to get. Those companies like a lot of practical experience, but there's so many contract jobs to bridge you into that as well. But
yeah, and the certified threat manager is one of the hardest certifications to get. I think there's less than 200 people in the world who have one, and
I bet I could get it. I bet
it'll take you about 2 years to get one.
It's not. I can't get another certification. I got to focus on sales. But
well, that's the beautiful thing about most of the certifications out there is they're experience based. You normally, to even qualify to take the certification exam, you have to have a certain number of years of experience in that field, and so it's not like a college student is getting out of college and takes the CPP, and he has the CPP but no relevant experience. So everyone who's taking that exam has attested, I have this experience, it's gone through some level of verification,
right?
So absolutely, it's definitely something to keep in mind. So, hey, I know we're coming up at the top of the hour, and I know we could talk all day about this, but you've mentored a lot of people over the years. You've had a really, really successful career overall. What advice would you give people who are either in the transition process currently or are considering transitioning?
Well, let's do the consider first, right? On the consider side, you really need to take inventory on what you're going to lose and what you're going to gain, right? You do the whole chart, like what are the benefits? What is, where am I at my age and stage of career? You got to take into consideration what's going on in the economy too, right? But at the same time, depending on what your situation is, whether it be if you're malcontent, or I had another friend that handled so many child sex crimes, he needed to get out, right? And he wasn't prepared to get out. And so now, you just don't want to put your health at risk. But if you're thinking about it, start your investigation process now. Have conversations with people. See what tickles you. Find something that entices you, that go, you know what? I think I want to be whatever. Maybe it's loss prevention. Maybe it's global and corporate security. Maybe it's, don't negate sales. I've got people doing very, very well in sales, and it's all about relationships. And there are some great products out there that you can really put your name behind. But investigate that, see what that looks like, and have the conversations. And then once you make your decision, then set the date. That's the first thing you've got to do is set the date. I am leaving this date and this is where I'm going. Or and don't be afraid of, make a list of bridge jobs, those jobs that you think you could do that can sustain you while you're building everything else. It's something that you're going to do, and it's just there. You're just there to learn, right? There's a lot of great people who worked in guard management. I learned everything I needed to learn in 3 years, and I know that industry backwards and forwards. I succeeded in it, and there's people who've been in that industry for 20 plus years, so you can do very well in that industry. But for me, it was a bridge job. To others, it's a career. But look into that. The people that are in transition, and I guess that the focus of that question is more like people that are transitioning, and maybe they're running into problems, or they're running into whatever, maybe some uncertainty. Stay the course. I'd say keep networking. Go to every single networking event that you can, shaking hands with people. Make a list of those people. Celebrate their wins. Help other people along that journey, but continue to sharpen your own saw. I remember, and I still do this to this day. I mean, I have a couple of books next to me. I learned at ILEA, the Institute for Law Enforcement Administration, to become a lifetime learner, right? And what does that mean? That means I'm either reading a book, or I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm sharing an article, because again, it takes Chris a little bit longer to get through things than most people, but I study a lot and I listen a lot. And so now I study a lot of sales type things, understanding industry dynamics, and I also study technical aspects of what is the latest and greatest that companies may be asking for. So topics of discussions around AI and around robotics and things of this nature. But study the trade, right? So if you're going into loss prevention, you need to know who the top companies are within the loss prevention industry, who's hiring, who's doing what do they use, what are the things that they covet. If you want to be the guy that works for this company in loss prevention, then go look at that company, look at the certifications that they have, and then mimic what they're doing, right? And make those connections, and stay the course, right? This is a security, business continuity, loss prevention. We're still in the business of protecting people, and it's fun. I mean, we get to do some really cool stuff on this side of the house, and I think that there's a lot of work to be done with a lot of good people. So I hope that I kind of hit all the
man.
points. But
I love it.
Stay the course.
Absolutely, like those. I know I say this a lot on every single podcast, but stay the course, words to live by. That's exactly what I'm looking for, and that's what I think that our listeners are looking for as well. One thing I want to ask you before we go is, I get a lot of people who I talk to who want to go work for Flock Safety, or want to go work for Axon or Motorola, or and be those account managers that are the liaisons between the company and the law enforcement agencies. They really have a passion for that. Maybe they've used Flock Safety or one of those other platforms in their law enforcement careers. And so they really have that. I know it works. It's been such a game changer for us. Now I want to be the person that goes and delivers that. But a lot of these positions require previous sales experience, which obviously they don't have for the most part. So, you've been in sales for a long time. You've done artificial intelligence, and you've done the security integration side. So what advice do you have for people who are considering a sales job within a law enforcement capacity?
I have seen a little bit opposite. I've seen that there are companies that are open to hiring people without experience, but it all depends on the depth of their team, right? So if the group they're coming on with has a deep bench of seasoned veterans, I don't have a bit of problem hiring on somebody who needs to scale up. The challenge is within sales, every sales manager wants to quickly scale up, right? They don't have time, especially with Flock's a growing company, Axon's growing. But if you can talk the lingo and you can talk prospecting, and you have some semblance of how to prospect, how to work things through the pipeline, how to move a client to a warmer state, how to have a conversation. What does it mean about consultative sales? If you're studied up on that, it's an easy discussion to have. But the challenge is people see that, oh, I was a cop, I use Flock, it's great, I know how it works, I can tell people about it, and they're going to buy it. Well, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot to it. And the other thing is, I love sales, but and some of these groups, I've talked to people at Flock in the past, and I've talked to people at Axon. They're wonderful people. You're going to be traveling a lot. You got to be out there in front of people. You've got to be talking to a lot of people, and the wins are there. There's a lot of money to be made. There's great benefits and phenomenal products, but it's a different way of living. And there are other positions that don't take as much time, that don't take as much travel time. You've got to seek those things out. But just like anything else, you got to study. I spent a lot of time studying a gentleman by the name of Mike Weinberg, and he has a great podcast on Spotify as well. And when I was studying for this position, I studied a lot with, I wanted to be the best salesperson I could, or where I came from, and I did very well in a short amount of time. And this is not hard work, but you do need to be an expert in your discipline, because people need to trust you, right? If you don't know what you're talking about, buyers today have everything at their fingertips. They don't need you to know about the product. They need to trust you, and they need to know that your company's reputable, and they need to know that you're going to follow through and get them what they need when they need it at fair market value. And so, we spend a lot of time shedding the salesmanship of sales, where it sometimes can be looked upon as a negative. We look at it upon as consultants, right? We just best fit, best purpose. We just want to take care of you. And that's why I thrive in this type of world, because I get to bring my consultancy to the forefront and just make sure people are taken care of at a fair market value. So, but that's the advice I'd give, man. Study. Could you imagine? I mean, we didn't have this much information at our fingertips than people do today. Like, there is no reason why anybody's not flourishing. You can learn anything. You can spend the afternoon learning how to do anything under the sun, and it's right there for you. So,
yeah, if anything, we suffer from an overwhelming amount of information,
Yes.
And one thing that you mentioned earlier was, you're like, hey, certifications are great, talk to people, etc. A lot of the problems that people have, or a lot of the questions that individuals bring up is, well, if they want sales experience, how can I get that experience when no one will give it to me? Or how can I get that experience without starting over at the bottom and taking a significant pay cut? And so, obviously there are companies out there that will bring you in at a level that still enables you to provide for your family and stuff like that. But I guess the reason I'm kind of harping on this a little bit is because of the overwhelming amount of questions that I get that are geared around sales as they relate to law enforcement and the government.
Yeah, there's a lot of some organizations are also set up where they have inside sales and outside sales. Inside meaning you're at the office and you're taking phone calls and you're answering questions, and then you're working people through a process. And then most inside people, that's where they learn the product, and then they move to outside sales where they're traveling around a little bit more. But again, it goes back to connections. I mean, I got involved in sales when I was at G4S because they wanted me to be a part of the presentation when we talked about how we managed guard service. And then I didn't do any sales at Heritage Auctions, right? I mean, I was just a global security guy. CBRE, I was on the global sales calls to talk about how we oversee security services. So I was a presenter, I'm well-spoken, I can talk to anybody, it's no problem. And then, but my first actual sales position was when I was with a startup company. And that's when I learned funnel position, how to target people, how to do X, Y, and Z. and I wanted to be the best because that's the way I do things. And so I almost think it's maybe I don't want to be the best. I just don't want to look stupid, right? It's the ego thing.
Right.
And so I would study to make sure I was doing things the right way. And then I put those things into place. So, but that all came through networking. I got my position through networking with people, and they see where your value is. But don't be discouraged. You know, if that's what you really want to do, it will happen. If you're gifted in that way, your gifts will be seen, and you will find what you need, right? But maybe you're not so gifted that way. Some people want to make the money that some of these salespeople make, but they ain't willing to do the work. And I've got some people that it's taken them a long way to get to where they're at, but they're really good at what they do. But they know how to prospect, they know how to find buyers, and then know how to speak to those buyers. And
Right.
we're not, no salesperson, the kind of people that I work with are selling stuff that people selling what people don't want, right? We're just bringing products to the marketplace and looking for fair market value and making sure that it's bringing that consultative approach. So it just kind of depends on the organization, but I do, especially Axon. I interviewed with them actually for a sales director position, and they were absolutely wonderful. I'm still a fan of their company. Hey Chris, they said that I know you would be very successful based on talking to you, but you don't have the experience, and I can't deliver that to my boss. I said, fair enough. Look at me now.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Absolutely. Well, Chris, I really appreciate your time, and I know I could talk to you all day long, but you've given us a lot to think about. Definitely taken me down my own trip, of memories and some of the things that I've went through that are remarkably similar, to your own journey. But I really believe that what you have to say to people and the way that you deliver it, and your focus on integrity and trust in relationships is really going to resonate with a lot of people. I just got a text message literally 2 seconds ago from a guy who transitioned out of the ATF and now lives over in the southeastern US. And he said, hey, really, really appreciate what you're doing. It really just tells me that I'm not alone. It tells me that my experiences, while they're impacting me, they're not unique. It doesn't mean that I'm not, it means that I'm not as unemployable as I thought I was. And so it just goes back to, what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation of, the purpose of one of the main purposes of these podcasts is just to give you a sense of what everyone else's journey has been like.
Yeah.
And, we're all going to struggle with our own individual unique problems, but we're not alone in this process either.
Yeah, that's good stuff. People need hope, and it's good to lift them up. But there's so much, there's so much opportunity out there. I had to quit. I used to follow the job board so I could share it with people, but I quit doing it because I'm like, oh, that looks pretty interesting. I'm like, nope, gotta focus. So anyway.
Exactly. Well, hey, brother, I really appreciate your time. Thank you again, and we'll chat soon, man.
Awesome. God bless. Have a great day.
Brother.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.